Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Dauntless Leadership. For those of you who are new to us, thank you for being here. And don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube or at dauntless.works. Today, I am so delighted to have with me Joe Aurilia, who is the SVP of Operations at Cyware. And Joe comes to me introduced because of the work that I do at Rutgers, and he is a Rutgers alum. His cybersecurity organization operationalizes threat intelligence. What does that mean? We're going to talk about it because it's really important. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much for having me here, Lisa. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
So I was lucky to be introduced to you because we both do an awful lot with Rutgers University. And I was spending time with the Rutgers University Foundation and talking a little bit about making sure that the Dauntless LeadHERship Podcast was available to women and men at Rutgers, recent grads. And they said, there's somebody that you really need to talk to, and pointed me to you. So I'm going to ask you to start first by telling me, what does Dauntless mean to you? And second, by giving me a bit about your career journey.
Yeah, that sounds great, and happy that we got connected. Happy to have the opportunity to have this chat here. I don't, you don't really hear the word dauntless too much, but I think that when you do hear it, it just has a very impactful meaning associated with it. So off the cuff, I'd have to say, to me, it means, going after something to completion and not giving up. So there'll be barriers, obstacles, complications, but you know what you have to do, you know what is right, and you're not going to rest until it's done.
Thank you. And you have had a very interesting career journey, and I love for our listeners to hear about that. How did you make the decisions you made and land where you are today?
Sure, yeah, I'll try to give the brief synopsis of that. So, did graduate from Rutgers a while back. I was a computer science major, really loved the technology aspect, the coding, the designing of large scale systems, great education. And I did that for a long time with AT&T and IBM, really responsible for large scale ordering, workflow delivery, business intelligence, high availability, the kind of stuff that would, if you had an issue at 2 a.m, you're fixing it, right? Really critical type, mission critical applications. But I also loved creating businesses. So it runs in a family. I had a few of my own over the course of time. So really kind of mixing the two together was, really important factor. So received my MBA, different school in New Jersey, and then had worked for IBM for a bit longer, a lot of maturity, a lot of experience there, great experience. And then created a renewable energy company from scratch back in New Jersey. We built it out to 3 states, about 800 cities and towns across those states. And we're really focused on what I thought was important and still think is important is the customer. Put the customer in the middle of the conversation, make sure everything makes the customer happy, automate as much as you can, and make sure you have any kind of people process scripted. And we really chose Salesforce, operationalized a whole business around that, really streamlined everything. And at the end of the day, many years later, we realized that was a revenue operations focused business, which is a term that we use very often now. It didn't exist back then. It's also a sector that I'm also very involved in, I think is great for businesses going forward. So that was a great experience. And then where I am today, which is Cyware, which is the cybersecurity company, got connected with them back in 2019. They're looking for an individual as their first U.S. hire to help bring the company forward on the U.S. side. And we decided to take that jump together. And it's been a lot of great experience since then. Did a lot of phenomenal work together. We grew at that point to 7 countries, with headcount, nearly 300 people, selling in over a dozen, 3 rounds of funding, really getting the opportunity to build, scale, all of the operational departments globally. So touching so many different areas, so much different responsibility, working with a lot of great people, hiring a ton, seeing people grow within their roles. So really a fully encompassing kind of growth and scaling experience. And in that journey, we found each other here and, happy to share any information I can to kind of help others.
Thank you. And that's why we're here. My goal is to learn a lot myself and to share that with other folks. And as I think about you and your journey, I have several questions for you. The first is you mentioned that the family had been in business. What kind of family business did your family start with, and how did that inspire you?
Definitely yet an entirely different market. I've been in many different markets. So closest from a lineage point of view was home improvement. So had one of those businesses, custom and high end since the 70s. My dad had that, work with him for a very, very long time, before, graduating college. And really great, really focusing on do the right thing, make people happy, do what you say you're going to do, complete the job, be good with people, good with your employees, good with your teams. And those kind of core principles, I think, migrate to any business. It doesn't matter whether you're a mom and pop business or a large business or you're a nonprofit. Treat people with respect, do what you say you're going to do, and we're all happy at the end.
Treat people with respect and do what you say you're going to do. And you also mentioned putting the customer at the center. And I think no matter what kind of business you're offering, and whether it's to a consumer or to a business, that's so important. What pointers do you have about how to make sure that you always keep the customer at the center of what you do?
I think it's both simple and also challenging at the same time, because without someone to buy your product or service, then why do you exist, right? What's the point of having a company if you're not producing something, you're not being able to grow from there? It's also challenging sometimes because you in your mind might have this idea that you think is phenomenal, yet the customer doesn't agree with it. And you have both positives and negatives on that, right? If you take, like the iPhone, for example, do we know we wanted the phone that we could touch beforehand? We've never experienced that. They knew the customer would want something, but they didn't express it yet. So I think, if you think about it from that point of view, it's really just thinking about where your customer is heading, where is technology is headed, where is the future headed, and trying to meet them where they're at, but also trying to meet them where they will be in the future, and kind of keeping that in your decision making. So whether you're, talking about how you're going to market, how your product is packaged, the kind of features and services it provides, or where it kind of fits in the person's life, if it's residential or if it's commercial. Just trying to really understand what the other side of the fence looks like. So it's not just you pushing this item or service out, it's got to be consumed. So what does it look like? What does it feel like when it's consumed?
That's really good advice. And for me, as I talk to entrepreneurs and folks at any level in management, I always say you have to really be able to picture your target audience almost as an avatar, 360 degrees, walk around her, him, or them, and understand what are they thinking. Best way to do that, I always say, is to ask, run either informal qualitative or more formal quantitative research, and make sure that you know what you're talking about. And in particular, that's hard when they can't articulate what it is they want. Then it's incumbent upon you to kind of figure it out so that everybody can skate to the puck. Um, you you mentioned that this is important in all of your businesses. Who are your customers at Cyware, and what are the top things that they need?
For us, our customers are going to be, the largest global and international enterprise customers that are out there, right? So entities that have very, very large security teams are looking to reduce silos in the information sharing of threats within their organization, within the network of networks. They're looking to automate and orchestrate, the threat intelligence and the handling of incidents and other types of situations. And they need technology to help them do that, right? We have so much data flowing through our systems these days, so much potential things to look at. We need, vastly new and superior technologies to allow folks to get a handle on the information and truly be able to make decisions, based on the information. So that's kind of where we come into the fold on the threat intelligence side.
As a consumer, I understand threat intelligence. I know I need to protect my privacy and my data. I take lots of online classes to avoid phishing. But what does threat intelligence mean to an enterprise? And when you think about it, what should businesses be thinking about when it comes to threat intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, I think that term, it means a lot of different things to different businesses, depending on where you are in the world. If you're in the food industry, you're worried about threats to crops, to farmers, to supply chains. If you were a space industry, you're worried about threats to equipment, communication. If you were a financial industry, you're worried about, disruption and other matters. So, the concept of a threat, in general, we all understand it, but then it also gets specialized down to what do you care about? What kind of threats can impact your organization? So when you're doing a risk analysis of your company, you know what's important to you. Now, from a technology point of view, there's some commonalized data out there, obviously, that flows through systems that allows people to see what kind of threats are out there that can impact their technical systems. That's kind of like the most common from a technical point of view. And then you can obviously, add to that auxiliary information that might be specified to your particular industry, your particular sector. So you have a more encompassing view of what you need to look at and how you can mitigate and, kind of defend against that.
I did a podcast with Gen Zers and millennials, and one of the topics was coming back into the office and whether they felt that they wanted to go back to the office. A lot of companies are requiring it. And one of the guests actually works for the government, the federal government, and she said, um, well, it's actually more secure if we're all in the same building from a data standpoint. And that's one of the factors, at least for her organization, in calling everybody back in. Is that true? Is there more of a risk if people are dispersed and working virtually?
Think I have to go very technical on the reply there. It
Oh,
really depends on what's set up. So, for example, if the entity at question, whether private or public, is set up in such a way where you can only access the technology within that defined space. So, within that particular office location, right? It's not accessible from anywhere else. And by that definition, sure, you're accessing it only within that one dedicated location. All outside pipes and communications are cut off. In the general sense of a corporation, and how we normally do business, a lot of our applications are SaaS-based. They're online. They're available from many different locations. It's hard to say that it's more secure in one place than another because the information is really available everywhere. So when your employee goes home, are you saying, don't check email on your phone? Don't log into Salesforce, don't check Asana, right? The applications are available everywhere. So it's really a different way they have to look at the security model of how you authorize and authenticate users these days and the kind of training, around that to be as secure as you possibly can be.
I know when I work with financial institutions or banks, they often say we can't accept an outside file. There's no way you can download something into our system. We can't go out to a Dropbox. So I guess it really does depend on what industry, but it makes it hard to do the job the way you want to do the job. And what we're used to, at least in marketing, is giving people access to lots of content wherever they are. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about leadership characteristics. Can you tell me, what do you feel is really important in terms of an emerging leader? What do you look for in somebody that you're developing? And what do you do to develop him or her or them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from again, the word leadership, we use that a lot, right? It means many different things to many different people. I think these days, kind of old terms, but trust, integrity, and honesty, I think are really important, right? Um, they will buy you so much more credibility and communication than being the smartest person in the room, because it just has just a certain benefit when you're working with other humans, right? We're not all machines yet. We're still communicating, human to human. The ability to know that your leaders are telling you the truth, whether good or bad, that they're with you, that they have your back, that they're going to work together, that when there's a situation, titles don't matter, pay doesn't matter. You're solving a problem. You're just working together to solve a problem. I think in that way, leaders really demonstrate that they're helping to guide a group forward to accomplish a mission, a project, or goal. It's really not about them and what they've accomplished. It's really about what they can help others accomplish together by working in a particular fashion. So I've been looking for those three elements. I've been looking for collaboration, communication. How well can you explain things? How well can you sell things, right? If we think about a lot of the activities that happen in business and even in personal life, you're trying to get another human to agree with you. You may get them to agree with you wholeheartedly. You might meet somewhere in the middle. You might meet closer to their side. But if you can't communicate and articulate your idea, if you can't also understand where they're coming from to look at both sides of that fence, you're already in a losing conversation. So a leader really needs to have a great grasp of that communication ability, in my opinion.
I feel like that's especially important now when we're so divided in our points of view. Learning how to get across your point of view without offending somebody else, and maybe even persuade them to come along for the ride. And you called that sales and communications, and I think that's true. To be successful in business, you have to, I don't want to say always be closing, that ABC term, but you have to be sensitive to the fact that you need to convince and persuade. You mentioned trust, integrity, and honesty. Those are factors I would definitely expect to hear coming from a cybersecurity organization. How do you know? How do you identify a candidate that truly offers those characteristics?
It's definitely not a search field on LinkedIn that you can find, right? There's no box that you can check and say, oh, this person definitely has that. And even in conversation, there's no guaranteed way to know that you're correct. Um, in my opinion, in the interview process, when you're having those conversations, it kind of goes back to being human again. You're going to get a feel for the conversation. You're going to understand how information is being conveyed, what is shared, what is not shared, how it is communicated, how it is articulated, the way problems are solved, the way situations are handled. You really, I don't want to say gut feel because that might sound a little cheesy, but you're really kind of trying to figure out the way the person thinks. The way I think that you can, I want to say, mitigate mistakes, but also just ensure that you're heading the right path, is that part of being a leader, part of our hiring people is also ensuring that you're walking together on that right path. So if you have an individual who should be a leader, and you're 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, wherever it is, and you realize that you're not walking along the right path, you have to have a conversation. You have to understand if you were giving the wrong information, if you didn't advise properly, if there was a disjointed understanding of how the world operates in that particular entity, and to see if you can get back on that path. So it's important to not only try to find good leaders once you have them. It's not like just kind of hire someone and set them free. You work together to ensure that you're both maturing to where you need to be. So it really goes back to that collaboration piece again.
Collaboration and walking the path together. Right about here in the podcast is where our listeners could be hearing your very own sponsorship message. Our subscribers are smart, talented, interested professionals. If you'd consider sponsoring Dauntless Leadership, we'd love to hear from you. I'm always available at lisa@lisa-kent.com. Thank you. How about if we're talking to emerging leaders on this podcast, what would you advise them to do to demonstrate to their managers and to their teams that they truly do bring integrity and collaborativeness to solve a problem?
You know, there's one thing to provide an answer to a problem. There's another thing to have all the information around it as well. So you think about a lawyer going to court. Yes, they know if their client is right or wrong, whatever happens to be. Yes, they have certain facts, but they have the entire story. They are prepared to communicate and go to battle with that information. In business, it's really no different. You have to understand the benefits of your decision, the deficits of your decision, where it fits into the entire story. So when you're communicating with your team, with your boss, with your leaders, it's not just to say, hey, I did project X, but understand what was the value of project X? What was the impact it had? And there's nothing wrong with answering those questions. In many cases, they may not receive that information. Depending on where they are in the company, they might
Yeah.
just be told, do project X. The difference, to your point, is asking, why did I do project X? What benefit did it have? How does project X relate to my other work? Can I build upon project X later on? Is this going to yield me to something else where we're going to see these things stacked together? So that inquisitiveness and understanding about where they are in that structure differentiates the person who does project X and then the person who understands why they did it and how that gets them to move forward.
Do you actually want to hear people ask the question why?
If they don't ask why, I mean, essentially we're just talking about, following instructions, which some jobs require that, others don't.
That, I mean, that's really heartening to hear because I mentioned that podcast with younger people, and they said, we always want to know why. The old way of doing business, you give us our marching orders and we just go do it. Our generation, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, millennials, we want to know, why are we doing it? Why do we have to do it? What impact is it going to have? And why are we doing it this way? And I thought that was enlightening for me to hear, because I come from a generation where if my boss told me to do something, I'd probably just go do it.
I do want to, just in fairness, add like a little caveat. So, like, yes, it's great to ask why, but also understand that the decision that you go forward with may not always make you happy. So you might understand or hear the why. You might absolutely dislike the why, but you're still going to probably do it. And that's a little bit of a difference. So, understand, learn, discuss. If you have a point of view that's different, articulate it, but at some point you may not be able to change it. So it really is also understanding where that conversation can move and where the conversation cannot move. And I think that's a little bit of a finer art to kind of navigate.
You said, know the facts that surround an issue. And I always end the podcast using a quote from my mom, but when I struggled with a dilemma or a problem, used to say, well, where's your pros and cons list? Where's your list? And I feel like this is good coaching that you're giving folks to prepare, understand the facts, and what are the costs and benefits of whatever decision you might be recommending going forward. And you actually also said, and if it's not the decision you recommend or believed in, understand that that might be the case too.
In addition, if you don't mind, we talk about emerging leaders and what to do. Let's say we take Project X again. Apparently, it's a very famous project, and you don't understand something. Um, I may not have asked you to speak with other teams or to do certain things, but you might know they have information. So, did you take the initiative to find out, to schedule that meeting, to ask that peer in a different department to collaborate together? So, when you are able to reach across these departments by yourself and put pieces together and do that legwork without being micromanaged, that is also another sign of moving forward and leading, because you're able to understand how things work and how to get things done. And that is terribly different than just, rote doing A, B, and C because you were asked to do A, B, and C.
So take initiative beyond maybe what you were specifically asked to do and try to understand how things work, not just ask and not just do. I think those are really good tenets. And then shifting gears again, I want to come back to you. And what do you do as a leader to motivate your teams? And did you have a great boss back in the day? And what was great about that person?
Yeah, we'll see which one I take first. I mean, to motivate teams, as cheesy as it sounds, I believe that every meeting I should make someone laugh, whether it's at me, I don't really care, but meetings can't be stoic and boring and sad, right? So, we have to have some humanism in the conversation. I think being factual is great. A lot of times in business, especially in depending on where you are, you have very sincere, serious conversations. So share the facts, work together, understand how to solve a problem. I think that really differentiates the type of meetings and how teams react with you and how you can kind of get things done and work together. I definitely have seen differences across my time in different entities on how teams communicate when the leader has those conversations and works well with their team versus where I am manager, you are employee, like, and the lines are there. Like, it's just a totally different experience. As for a manager, I did have a manager a long time ago, and it's a funny story in my head. It was a very stressful, position that we had, and times were challenging. And he was like, Joe, I know you need more dry erase markers. I stole these for you. Here you go. It was just the little things like that. I mean, it's just, nothing to do with work, but like just very nice understanding, breaks the day up. You have to kind of bring that stuff into the conversation.
Okay, so very down to earth works for you. Um, I'd like to ask, what do you do for fun? I mean, it's got to be incredibly tense being in cybersecurity. So what do you do to blow off steam? What kind of things make you happy?
I like different types of activities. Skiing is super fun, hiking, outdoor stuff. Just get to see new things, kind of test new experiences. It's probably where the bulk of the things are done. I mean, there's so many great national parks, hiking trails, things to look at. Um, they're all for free. They're all out there. They're in every single state. They're just kind of waiting for you to go check them out.
Do you listen to podcasts or shows that educate you on business or personal things? And if so, are there some that you might recommend to our listeners?
It's hard. I was trying to think of that one. I mean, I have a lot of content. What I kind of find, especially for an operations person, is that we do so many different things, so many different disciplines, that the content almost guides you. So being part of a lot of communities, lots of different groups, you're always getting white papers, research reports, different trends. I kind of float between all the information. So I couldn't say I'm listening to one podcast religiously. It's really more of just letting the information guide you. Maybe this month you're on a kick about marketing, next month you're on a kick about customer service, and you're kind of going through there and researching. I think an important lesson for younger listeners and those just coming out, that learning doesn't end. And we've been saying that for decades, right? It's not like I'm saying something new, but understanding how to learn, how to gain knowledge, how to hunt and find. Again, that skill is more valuable than just being the smartest person in the room because you can expand to new things, you can find new things. And nowadays, with how much content we have out there, there's really no excuse for not finding information. If you have an internet connection, you can almost find everything that you need. The question is, are you able to? Can you consume the information? Can you tell facts from fiction? Can you digest it appropriately? That again differentiates folks.
Getting harder and harder if you ask me to tell fact from fiction, but I've never searched for something and haven't found some free information on it. You mentioned the importance of the human touch and being humanized in the work that you do, which is a funny thing for me to hear coming from a technology leader. But and it's particularly interesting given the onslaught of AI. And we're running a marketing summit at Rutgers in the spring. That for the second year, the topic will be the impact of AI on marketing and on the kinds of jobs that you do. So, how do we separate AI from being human? How do we keep our humanness and the input of humanness front and center in the work that we do and still leverage all the benefits we can get from AI?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously polarizing viewpoints on what AI is, right? From a definition point of view, from an impact point of view. Some think the Terminator is coming, some think they don't have a job, some think things that's it's useless. There's all different views. But think about it this way. We use Salesforce or any other CRM that you have these days, and you don't really think twice about it, you use it. It certainly killed that Rolodex, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that Rolodex was considered automation back in the day. Now a CRM is considered automation. How is that really any different than AI? Yes, AI is worlds more superior, faster, can do a lot more things, but all we're talking about is innovating and speeding up the access to information. It's just that the jump point now has, been much wider in a much shorter period of time. But to me, the use of that is again if you look at for an average employee, the quantity of applications that you have these days on your desktop, the quantity of information that you have to go through, is unfathomable. It wasn't like this 10 years ago. It definitely wasn't like that 20 years ago. It's humanly impossible for your brain to really capture all that information. So the ability to sort of help provide like a skeletal framework for that information to automate those aspects. Ideally, again, this is why education is very important, allows folks to focus on the parts that only the human could do, right? So you could want to buy this particular product. You can go online and have the AI tell you all about it, all the information. You can do that for 3 or 4 products, but then you really want to have a conversation about it. You want to really know from another person what the difference is. That's where that BDR, SDR, they gets elevated to a sales director, to a communications individual. They're having that more in-depth conversation, right? So we're kind of focusing and harnessing on those aspects that only that human can do. So just the roles are kind of shift a little bit to that higher level where everyone's going to be focusing ideally on more of those impactful things, and they're going to spend less of their time on the things that could technically be automated.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how I'm understanding what you're saying is artificial intelligence can help us filter vast quantities of data and information, but the synthesizing and the detecting themes and the pulling out the so what, that falls to the humans. And that's where we can demonstrate our strengths.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness, I mean, part of that is also done by the AI. But I think that the ability to share that with other humans, to mix it into the story, to coalesce things together, that sort of that integration and tying is where still that kind of that human aspect kind of goes.
Tying it together because you've done consulting work, I've done consulting work, and I feel like the value that I can bring is to be able to look at a lot of information with a lens that brings expertise and a diversity of experience that maybe somebody else wouldn't have, and then be able to say, and so what, and what do I do with this? Um, and there is a lot of discussion out there about whether artificial intelligence will eliminate the need for me or for what I do. And it's kind of refreshing to hear, probably not, although I might have to go a step beyond where I was before to add even more value. And that's good. I like to be pushed into the next realm. So that's a good thing. What else should I be asking you about artificial intelligence that I'm not asking you?
That's a hard one. I mean, it's such a popular space. There's just, so many products out there these days that I think on the procurement side, it's very challenging. You want to use new things, you want to enable your team, you want to be successful. You also can't swap out products every 3 months, right? It's really hard to do that, especially as the organization grows or is more global. So, that analysis process becomes a little bit more challenging, right? So just because you put AI on the label doesn't mean that it's a great product. You have to understand, well, how does it make it better? How much of the pie are you taking up? What are your use cases? How does it fit in the organization? Where's your roadmap going to it? And that just kind of makes things a little bit more challenging. So I think it's great, a lot of useful tools. It just kind of goes into now the human aspect is understanding, what is best? What is the best tool? How do I really roll it out? The AI can't roll this out to an organization. How do you mix that in with your other tools? How do you integrate? How do you define the safety, security, and compliance around that? How do you educate your teams? I mean, in any size company, you might have an individual who goes home and they're using ChatGPT all the time to do other things. You may have another person who just learned the word yesterday and they don't know how to use it at all. So understanding how to do that rollout is again, a human aspect.
I think that for me, it comes back to the customer again. What's their tolerance level for being able to roll out and integrate some of the new technology and actually use it and leverage it? And that's different in different parts of an organization, educationally versus, work-wise and personally.
You mentioned also lenses before, right? And it's kind of like a passing comment, but I think it's also important, especially as you talk about young leaders, is when you're looking at situations, the lens you're viewing it from is very key. Are you going to focus just on it because you're a marketing person? Are you going to focus on it just because you're a finance person? Switching how you're viewing things is also a differentiating factor to being able to communicate, be a leader, to share, because you're not bought into this is my only lens, right? This is all I like. This is all I believe in. You're really looking at, well, I have 100 lenses, and sometimes I use one. Maybe I mix them together like a Venn diagram. Like I mix and match, and by having the ability to not be locked into a single point of focus, I think allows you to do more, to lead more, to understand more, just like a consultant to be able to solve, more problems.
Uh, I feel like understanding a wider range, the more you move up in an organization, the broader, deeper and broader your experience is, and the more value you can add. And as a manager and a leader, one of the things that I always saw as my job was broadening for my team. That yes, they had to be good at going deep into solving a problem using a technology, but I also had to always be thinking about broadening experiences. How do you do that at your firm?
Ah, I think part of it is exploration. Someone might have a concept, and that concept maybe falls partially in their team, maybe partially in another. And you say, hey, why don't you go figure that out? Understand who to work with, solve it. Maybe it's not exactly what you've done in the past, but that's great. It's something new. So figure out how to kind of get there, have the freedom to go explore bring it back in a few days. Let's chat, see if we should spend more time on it. In addition, listening to ideas. But the ideas from your team only come if you're open to it. Again, back to being a good leader. If you just say, I manager, you employee, like you're not going to get any ideas, right? You're not going to have that conversation. But I feel if you're able to nurture your teams appropriately, they're going to bring you ideas. Hey, Lisa, I was curious about this. I think this would happen. Or I've been trying this on the side. What do you think? Now, in some situations, a manager say, well, you've been trying that on the side. So like your hours were doing what? Not what I asked. Whereas I would look at it and say, yeah, I mean that can work. Let's kind of go with it. Or no, it doesn't work, but like thanks for the initiative, right? So you have to have them feel safe, again, as a human, to be able to make those chances for the betterment of the team. Because you, as a leader, you can't make all the decisions yourself. You can't solve all the world's problems. If you don't get people to move up in that decision making, your company stays stagnant.
Do you leverage the power of networks? I feel like I met you through the Rutgers network, and certainly that's been an important part of anything I've achieved over the time. How do you do it? Do you have a network within or without work? And what do you recommend to people?
Yeah, I recommend you start sooner than I did. I'll go with that. So I didn't start until a while back, but not as early as I should have. Back then again,
Okay.
you were more on the technical side. Networking meant let's get a bunch of boxes together and wire them, right? Networking didn't involve people. I think it's very important to do that early on, to explore, to have conversations. For me, I have a wide variety of networks that I've joined over the course of time. I really like the ones that are in person, because you get to actually have those conversations, but there's a lot of mixed things, hybrid things. I've seen the model these days for some of the larger ones is, you have a great online community, you have resources and knowledge and learning and a hub. Then you also have, group events, in different cities and chapters. You have some larger events. So, we're really coming to this maturation of what is a community? How do you build a community? How do you nurture it? There's jobs that are now community leaders, growth leaders, just to just enable these communities to flourish and grow. So I think those are great. I think people should find them, test them, play with them, join them, learn from them, keep them around. Um, they're all out there. You just need to go kind of look.
And I like that you said to go in person. I think, with COVID, we sort of stepped back from physically going and being at group events. And I just went to one that happened to be the shore builders, people who did construction and home improvement, your dad's old business down at the Jersey Shore. And I went because this is not an industry that I know or understand, but I think it's so interesting what's happening down here. And if I wouldn't have gone in person, I never would have had a Zoom meeting with these people. So encouraging our listeners to just once a month go to a physical event with people that you don't already know to start to build your community. That's what I like to say to my students. Just if you could put on your calendar one thing a month, that's a big step forward.
Definitely. And I also want to say this, and may be deemed positive and negative by others, but a lot of folks have also been losing the art of communication, right? So you almost, it's almost like driving. You kind of need to do it once in a while so you still know how to talk to other people in that setting. So that way when you actually have to do that, maybe an individual is younger, they don't have a job yet, they're moving forward. This is practice for your job. This is practice for when you move forward to other, positions and conversations. So this not only helps you perhaps make friends, both professionally and for personally, it's really practice to articulate your art, understand what you're saying, whether it makes sense, should it be altered, how other people kind of receive your information. Are you talking too fast, too slow, too high level, too low level? We only learn that through communication. Yes, you can do the Zoom and the meets and the Teams and you will learn some stuff, but there's certain of that art that really can only be done by doing, like being a mechanic, right? Yes, you can learn that by going through all the lessons, but like, before you fix my car, I kind of want to know you actually did one before. So that kind of theory.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask you to talk about advice for our emerging leaders that might be listening, and any advice you received that you remember harken back to that you want to mention.
And so I had a manager a long, long time ago, and he told this to everybody, and it, makes more sense as you get older. But the concept was in any role, regardless of your title or position, uh, if you're not replaceable, you're also not promotable. So, just because you know all the stuff or you're very popular or you're the person they always call, that doesn't exactly mean that you can move up, both in the company and life and other types of things. So, one of your jobs is also trying to figure out how to not have a job. I don't mean that, literally, but more so, how do I enable others? How do I grow other leaders so I can do that next thing? So I can go up in my responsibility to continue my growth path and let someone follow me. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And to close today, in the immortal words of Arlene Barnett, you don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you want to try next. See y'all in the next episode. Bye-bye.